Welcome to the next in our series of online lectures for Western Civ 2. Today we're going to discuss the 1930s and the road to World War II. As always, there are a number of terms along the side here that you should know by the time this lecture is over. Please pay attention that some of these are actually geographical terms. In other words, they're the names of countries or regions. You should be aware of where those countries and regions are, as I may include some questions regarding that on our upcoming exam. So anyway, with that said, let's get to it. I want to begin this lecture by reviewing something we've already discussed. That is the book Mein Kampf. Mein Kampf means My Struggle, and it was a book written by Adolf Hitler while he was in prison back in the 1920s. Now, this book is a fascinating window on Hitler's mind because this book outlines Hitler's political ideology, it explains his ideas, and his view of the world. Now, we have already discussed how Hitler began to put his plans for the Jews into operation. There were the Nuremberg laws, followed by Kristallnacht. Now, today we're going to discuss his other plans. These plans will ultimately lead to war in Europe. Let's begin with Hitler and the Treaty of Versailles. Now, as I said earlier, the Treaty of Versailles had placed strict limits on the size of Germany's military. Now, beginning in 1935, Hitler begins to ignore these limitations. He builds a new air force. The Treaty of Versailles had forbidden Germany from having an air force. He also is going to begin increasing the size of the army to 550,000 men. The Treaty of Versailles had limited Germany to just 100,000 men. Now, had Britain and France known about this, this could have been grounds for war back in 1935. But Hitler initially kept his building plans secret. And once the British and the French learn of it, it's really too late to do anything. So what was that army for? Well, at least one motive for rebuilding Germany's military involved Lebensraum. Lebensraum was again the belief that the German people needed living space, in other words, more land for farming and for natural resources. Hitler began moving to establish more living space for the German people in 1938, when he annexed the nation of Austria. Now, Austria we have discussed before. Austria was a German-speaking nation that had historically been independent of Germany. That independence ends in March of 1938, when Hitler's troops march in to take control. Now, supposedly, this was not an invasion. According to Hitler, this was actually done at the request of the Austrian government, which was afraid that it was unable to keep order within its own country any longer. Nevertheless, following March of 1938, Austria will no longer be independent of Germany. By the fall of that year, Hitler had turned his eyes toward the nation of Czechoslovakia. This new nation had been created from the territories previously controlled by Austria-Hungary. This was a part of the Treaty of Versailles to create the nation of Czechoslovakia. When the borders for Czechoslovakia were drawn at the Treaty of Versailles, a number of German-speaking communities found themselves living in Czechoslovakia. Specifically, these communities were in an area of Czechoslovakia known as the Sudetenland. You can see on this map that the Sudetenland is that region of Czechoslovakia that borders Germany. Germany is the nation in purple to the north, and Czechoslovakia is sort of the orangish-colored nation below. The Sudetenland sort of is the northern border of Czechoslovakia. Well, anyway, in the fall of 1938, Hitler demanded that the Sudetenland be turned over to Germany. Now, this was easier said than done, however. Unlike Austria, Czechoslovakia was a strong democracy with a small but strong military. It also had an alliance with France, which was, everyone thought, the strongest nation in Western Europe. Many thought that Hitler's gamble, his push for the conquest of the Sudetenland, would result in failure. There were just too many things stacked against him. What they didn't realize, however, was that neither France nor Britain had stomach for another war with Germany. To deal with the crisis over the Sudetenland, the British and the French met with Hitler at a conference in the city of Munich. This becomes known as the Munich Conference, and again it met in September of 1938. The idea was to try and work out a solution to the crisis over the Sudetenland and avoid war. Ultimately, what was decided was that Britain and France would agree to Hitler's demands that Germany receive the Sudetenland in exchange for peace. Oddly enough, the Czechs were not consulted in this deal. They were furious when they found out. This policy of the British and the French to avoid war, to give in to Hitler to avoid war, is going to become known as appeasement. And this is not the first time, this is not the last time, I should say, that the British and French will give in exchange for what they thought was a guarantee of peace. It didn't take long for everyone to see how hollow Hitler's promises of peace were. In March of 1939, he marched his armies into the rest of Czechoslovakia. And again, Britain and France did nothing. By this point, Hitler had come to believe, I think with some reason, that Great Britain and France simply did not have the will to stop him. So he just kept pushing. His next target for Lebensraum was Poland, which had been given German territory in the Treaty of Versailles. Large chunks of what had been Germany were now within the nation of Poland. Hitler demands that that territory be given back to Germany. The Polish refuse. The results are predictable. On September 1st, 1939, Germany is going to launch a massive invasion of Poland. This time, however, Britain and France did not simply stand by and watch. Both quickly declared war on Germany. World War II was now a reality. Before it was over, tens of millions of people will die, and the future of Western civilization itself will be in question.